Raskin pushes back against Johnson in heated Epstein files debate. The moment he stepped forward, the entire chamber froze. What happened next wasn't just a debate. It was a collision of outrage, secrecy, and years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. And if you blinked for even a second, you missed the moment the conversation shifted from political theater to something far more explosive. Because when he pushed back, he didn't just challenge the argument. He tore open a question that had quietly haunted Washington for decades. Why were the Epstein files hidden for so long? And why is everyone suddenly fighting over them now?
The Speaker said that now would be a time we should be working on urgent legislative work. Mr. Speaker, justice is urgent legislative work. The truth is urgent legislative work. The Speaker says, why now? Why now? Well, Mr. Speaker, you were the one who refused to swear in Adelita Grahova for 50 days. We would have done it 50 days ago, but she provided the 218th signature on the discharge petition. So why now? It was because of your dilatory tactics, your delay, your postponement of it. Now, the gentleman says that there are not sufficient protections. There are protections in the bill for the victims to make sure that their names will be redacted. And yet we hear even the Speaker of the House of Representatives openly inviting the U.S. Senate to start finger painting on this bill, which we have waited more than 5 months to bring to the floor. The Senate should pass the bill exactly as it's written. The President should sign it exactly as he said he would when he finally changed his mind. And the Epstein file must be released. Moreover, if the President is serious about what he's saying, he's got the power to release the Epstein file right now. Nobody's stopping him. It's within his possession. It's within his control. He can release the whole thing, and he can redact the names of the victims and others who are innocent in this process. Mr. Speaker, Speaker Johnson said that these are unspeakable evils. Well, because of the bravery and the invincible courage of the women who've joined us today, they're no longer unspeakable. They're spoken. They're articulated. The cat is out of the bag, and we know what's been going on for decades. It's been a double standard of justice, going all the way back to Alex Acosta, who later got rewarded with a cabinet appointment in the Trump administration. Alex Acosta had a 60-count federal indictment ready to go against all kinds of people for an interstate sex trafficking conspiracy with solicitation, with child sex abuse, all of it. And he traded that 60-count federal indictment for 1 count in state court. And Jeffrey Epstein ended up getting the sweetest of sweetheart deals ever on the plea bargain front. He was free from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to do whatever he wanted and continuing to perpetrate his crimes and run his conspiracy. And then he would come and he would watch TV and spend the night in jail. And it was over in about a year after the rape and sexual abuse of hundreds and hundreds of girls. And he kept going and he kept at it. We want the whole truth to come out. This is the United States of America. Even the British monarchy wouldn't put up with this. How about the American democracy? How about we say, no way, we're not going to allow this cover-up to go on for 1 day more. And I'm glad the President changed his mind after pulling out all the stops to try to get one of our Republican colleagues to change their mind, to remove their name from the discharge petition. He gave up. And I want to salute the gentlelady from Colorado from having the courage to stand her ground in the Situation Room in the White House and say, no, she wasn't going to be bullied. No. So I'm glad the President changed his mind. But let's be clear, Mr. President, you've got the power today to release the entire file. That's what you called for. That's what Pam Bondi called for. That's what Kash Patel called for. So we don't need anybody calling for the Senate to slow things down for more weeks and more months. The American people have had it. We'll reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman is reminded to direct your comments to the chair and not your colleagues. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized, and you do have 90 seconds remaining. Correction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
The Democrat Party, with help from the dishonest media, used the Epstein files not to seek justice from the victims, but to smear President Trump. And it's sickening, quite sickening. The Democrats have used the Epstein files to distract the American people from the wins President Trump and his administration have delivered for the American people for the last 11 months. I'm proud to work with my Republican colleagues on the House Oversight Committee in coordination with the Justice Department. 65,000 pages of documents are related from Epstein released. What have my Democrat colleagues done? They selectively leaked and altered documents to mislead the American people.
That question, whispered across the gallery and echoed in every tense expression on the floor, became the heartbeat of the debate. As victims sat above watching, some shaking, some holding each other, the fight turned raw. You could feel it in the air. This wasn't going to be another routine floor speech. This was about power, truth, and a file that has terrified the most influential people in the country. And while both sides claimed they wanted transparency, the clash revealed something deeper, a fear that whatever's inside those documents could shake the entire political landscape in ways nobody is prepared for. But before the chamber erupted into open confrontation, the day began with something far more unexpected. The lights had barely come back on after a 43-day freeze when the House immediately plunged into a battle no one expected to be the first order of business. Legislative work had been stalled for weeks, major bills piled up, critical funding uncertain, but the moment session resumed, the conversation didn't turn toward healthcare, inflation, or appropriations. Instead, it snapped straight to the one topic everyone pretends they don't obsess over, but absolutely do: the Epstein files. Tension hit instantly. You could feel it in the way members shifted in their seats, the way the gallery murmured, the sudden change in tone. This wasn't about routine business. This was about secrets powerful people have been terrified to expose. One side argued the vote should have happened last week. Others insisted someone stalled it on purpose. Accusations flew: political theater, hostage-taking, showboating for the cameras. But beneath the noise was the real reason this debate was spiraling. Both sides knew that whatever was buried inside those files, it wasn't just names. It was leverage, reputation-destroying leverage. And the war over who controls the release and how it's released quickly became a war over narrative itself. The pressure only grew when the timeline was challenged. A simple question detonated across the chamber: why now? One side claimed the other had 4 long years to act and didn't lift a finger. They accused their opponents of suddenly discovering urgency only because cameras were rolling. And that question was brutal because no one could ignore it. Why now? Why this exact moment? Why this exact day? Some members whispered that the timing wasn't an accident. Reports suggest the push came the moment the last signature on the petition was locked in. Others argued the delay happened because one member was blocked from being sworn in for nearly 2 months. The argument wasn't calm. It was sharp, jagged, and full of simmering distrust. And the stakes shot even higher when the conversation shifted to something far more sensitive: victim privacy. You could feel the air tighten the second it was mentioned. The gallery above held survivors who had endured some of the darkest stories imaginable. Their presence changed everything. One side warned that the bill, as written, might expose their identities, mishandle sensitive material, or put future investigations at risk. They pointed to legal memos, national security concerns, and the very real danger of sloppy redactions. The tone wasn't political. It was painfully emotional. The other side fired back immediately, insisting the bill already protected victims, claiming these warnings were nothing more than excuses to delay the release. They accused opponents of trying to finger-paint edits in the Senate, stretching the process for weeks or months. The clash grew fierce and personal because this wasn't just paperwork. It was about whether the survivors' stories would finally be honored or mishandled again. But everything escalated when one lawmaker triggered a moment that sent shockwaves across the chamber. He began a parliamentary inquiry questioning how a children's account in a massive bill ended up named after someone linked to the infamous scandal. Then he pushed further, accusing leadership of misleading the floor about victim protections. His microphone was cut instantly. Gasps, stares, an entire room jolted. This wasn't supposed to be said out loud, not on the floor, and especially not with survivors watching from just feet away. But the tension kept climbing. because the next speaker didn't hold back. When he stepped up, the chamber fell silent. Then he delivered a rebuttal that set the room ablaze. He didn't just push back, he dismantled the argument. He said the only reason this hadn't been voted on earlier was because leadership refused to swear in a member whose signature was required to trigger the petition. And then he said it clearly: justice is urgent legislative work. He pointed to the women in the gallery, not as symbols, but as people who had lived through something horrific and waited decades for truth. He reminded the chamber that this wasn't the first cover-up, that a sweetheart deal years ago let a man walk free during the day while victims continued suffering. He said delays now only continue that same pattern of silence and excuses. Then he delivered a twist that hit the chamber harder than anything else. The president already has the power to release the entire file immediately, without waiting for Congress. The point hung heavy in the air, and no one wanted to touch it. But even after that, the clash wasn't done. The final rounds of speeches brought everything back to politics, strategy, and accusation. One lawmaker argued the push wasn't about justice at all, but about smearing a political figure. He said the media amplified it unfairly and claimed oversight had already released tens of thousands of pages anyway. The divide became crystal clear. One side insisted this was about exposing a decades-long web of silence and honoring survivors. The other insisted it was a coordinated attempt to weaponize the scandal. As the chamber moved toward the vote, one uncomfortable truth floated above every argument. Nobody knows everything inside the Epstein files. And that is the true source of fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what relationships, communications, flight logs, calendars, and money trails will reveal. Fear of what happens when secrets carefully protected for years are exposed in seconds. Because once the files are out, really out, there's no undoing it. And the world will finally see what's been kept in the dark. This debate wasn't just political chaos. It was a warning shot, a sign that whatever comes next will impact far more than Congress. Because the real question isn't just what's inside the Epstein files. It's what happens when the world finally sees them. If you want breakdowns like this, full coverage as the files unfold, and deep dives into the stories others avoid, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. The next chapter is already on its way.